Welcome to Executive Access, your home for real talk with industry leaders. I am your host, Jamie Tazi. Today, I am speaking with Arlin Sorensen, Vice President of Ecosystem Evangelism at ConnectWise. Arlin is a serial entrepreneur. He was an Iowa farmer turned tech exec. We talked about the go-giver mindset, which he brought to his companies and the transformational impact that it had. His leadership is really rooted in biblical principles, and we had an absolutely beautiful conversation about living and speaking authentically in the workplace about your faith. Arlin's focus on supporting leaders as whole people, not just at work, not just at home, led him to create successful senior leader peer groups, which you'll be interested in hearing about. He also helps leaders think about the transition from success to significance and the role that planning and legacy planning has for your life. Arlin was such an encouragement for me today, and I believe he'll be an encouragement for many of you as well. Let's dive in. Well, good morning, Arlin. Welcome to the Executive Access Podcast. I am so happy to have you on today.
It's great to be with you, Jamie.
Thank you. There's so much I want to talk to you about today from a business perspective and just how you lead. But before we get there, I love to start with a growth mindset question. What are you doing currently to learn and grow, either professionally or personally?
Well, there's a lot of things going on at the place I work here, ConnectWise in Florida. We just are going through a CEO change. And, I've been a small business guy my whole life. So I've always been the guy that made the change, wasn't on the receiving end of the change. And so I'm learning a lot about, larger companies, private equity backed companies, and just what it really is all about to be part of a larger organization. And it's been a great learning experience for me, that's for sure. Leadership's a lot different when you're sharing it across, an entire team and trying to move, a massive amount of people around the globe, especially. And with this new remote workforce, that's a whole nother factor that we've got to learn to deal with. So there's a lot of learning going on for this old Iowa farm boy.
It's so funny. 5 years ago, I spent most of my career my entire career at very large organizations. And 5 years ago, when I left and I started to work with smaller growth stage firms, I'm on the board of a couple organizations. So I had that same learning. I'm like on the board with a bunch of venture capitalist founders. I'm like, I am in such huge learning mode right now. I felt a little bit out of sorts at first, which was good. It was good to kind of have that growth experience. So I think I experienced what you're experiencing, but in reverse. So. Reverse, exactly. Yeah. So you mentioned that you're a Iowa farm boy. I love your story. I'd love to hear a little bit about it, your background. So you started off, my understanding is you were a farmer in the farming industry and somehow made your way into tech. Like, I don't know whether you saw a need that was being unmet by you in the agricultural space or what, but and then founded a tech company. Can you describe that a little bit for our listeners?
Absolutely. Yeah, I went to school at Iowa State and took farm operations. I was returning home to farm with my dad and brother, and that's what I did for the first part of my career. And along that journey, Apple II Plus came to the market, and I had a good friend that was a teacher at our local school, and I asked him if I could come in after school and just poke around on this computer because I never really got to use a computer in my education journey. And he said, "Sure, come on in. I'll teach you how it runs." And I just fell in love with technology. And so I managed to convince my wife that we should spend $4,000 on this little Apple II computer with a green screen monitor and a dot matrix printer to keep my farm accounting on. And I didn't really need a computer actually, but it sounded reasonable. So she went along with me, and I bought it and just really got consumed by it. And so that's where it came from. And over the years we grew, and neighbors would come over and want to look at this massive, awesome machine I had, and so I would show it to them, and they'd say, "Well, where can we get one of those?" And we'd load up 3 or 4 of us in the car, and I'd drive them down to Omaha. That was the closest place you could buy a computer in those days, about 50 miles away. I'd help them pick it out and buy it and take it home, and then I'd help teach them how to set it up and use it. And that was the humble beginnings that started my tech career. After a few years of doing that for free, I said, there might be a business here. And so I started a little hobby business and continued to do farm accounting systems for local farmers. And in 1990, I made the big step and hired an employee, and that changes everything in your world when all of a sudden it's not just you, but you've got somebody else you're kind of responsible for taking care of. And so at that point, we incorporated, became a real business, and started to grow the company. And so it was a great ride. I did the IT business and also an ag tech business. And then along that journey, I started our peer group business as well. So I've always been a serial entrepreneur. I've started 22 companies or business units in my career. They weren't all genius ideas, that's for sure. But few of them worked out really well, and it's been a fun ride, that's for sure.
Well, it's so interesting. I could spend the entire time talking to you about just, your leadership of all of these businesses, and we will. I think we're going to pull the through lines there. But I think what has me most excited about you and your reputation and having you on is the way that you lead and some of the values and things that you bring through. I'll tell you a story. So I received a book from my dad. My dad is probably one of my biggest fans of this podcast and my leadership work. And he's like, Jamie, I want you to read this book. It's called Go Giver Sales, I think is the name of the book. And he's a sales professional and speaker. And he's like, you're going to love this. This methodology, this thought process is exactly what you talk about all the time. It's you need to read this. So I read the book and it was really good. But halfway through the book, there's you in the book. This author is referencing you and your peer groups and the things that you do. And so I would love for you to share with my audience what Go Giver is all about, what that mindset is all about, and how it impacts people and also business results.
Yeah, I mean, the Go Giver changed my life when that book came out back in 2008. And I think the thing that we often lose track of in business is that, we may sell widgets and gadgets and services and all that stuff, but we're really in the people business.
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's about people. And the Go Giver really captures that. There's 5 laws of the Go Giver that Bob Berg and John David Mann wrote about in their original book called The Go Giver. And, the ones that really struck me and caused me to change was the first one, the law of value. And it's, what we are going to receive in terms of worth is determined by how we make other people more important. And it's not about how much we charge them, it's the value we create and then the payment that they're willing to share with us. And, that really was a mind shift that I had to make. The hardest one for me is the law of receptivity, which is, if we're going to give to others, we got to be willing to receive. And a lot of us struggle with receiving. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work hard and do it yourself. Anytime we're unwilling to receive, we're robbing somebody else the opportunity to give. And that lesson really changed the way I look at things. My leadership style, my success is not because I'm the sharpest knife in the drawer. That's not how it works. It's because I really have tried to implement and understand that other people have got better ideas than I do. And it's when we collectively work together and we're willing to give and receive to each other that we can really move the needle in terms of leadership. And so, Bob and John wrote this awesome book. We adopted it, in our companies, and it's been the foundation of how we do peer groups ever since it came out.
I think it's beautiful. My team has worked with me for a long time. Would say that I always anchor on this idea of customer obsession. Let's stop thinking about ourselves so much and start obsessing over our customers and their needs. And when we do that, then we will become better, create value. And then guess what happens? Like, you don't do it because of this reason, but good things come back to you, right? And I think that's all around the the law of value. So I didn't have this go-giver methodology at the time, or I was much more interested, or I had seen, not more interested, but I had seen first the outward mindset, which is similar.
Right.
But I'm so fascinated by it because it truly is so core to my belief system and what can happen, big things. So tell me what happened when you implemented this and made this the core of your company. What did you start seeing?
Well, I mean, we saw deeper relationships with employees, with customers. It just penetrates everything that you do. And the thing that I really discovered along the journey was that these five laws that are part of the go-giver mindset, they're biblically based, okay? And the thing about stuff that's biblical is it always works. That's the thing that you that I've learned watching companies. They don't always know it's a biblical principle, but if it is, it always works. God's stuff never fails. And that's why this book is so important and why it always makes an impact if people take it to heart, is because those five laws are all based on scripture. And they make a difference because they always work.
So I'm so glad you brought up scripture. By the way, I was working my way through Proverbs a couple months ago, and my husband walked in the room, and I'm like, "Can you believe this book was written thousands of years ago? This is like true wisdom to apply to today." And when you really let that sink in, it just made me laugh. I'm like, "Okay, there is definitely something more than just a good book here. Like this is very spiritually breathed." But I'm glad you brought it up because I have been dying to ask you this question. We just met today, a few minutes ago, but I've personally grappled with how to incorporate my faith, my Christian faith, into my work in a way that is inviting, not divisive, and living authentically that way. And in the past, even now, I would say this is the first time I'm really talking about my faith in this podcast. I've separated out these two things and just said, Jamie, it's good enough that they will know what your faith is, or they might ask you just by the way you act. So if you live it out, that's good enough. But you seem to live very authentically in your faith, even just how you brought up your faith just right then and there, in this podcast. I also know you've led prayer group meetings, optional prayer group meetings during large partner gatherings and things like that. Please help me a little bit here. Give me your wisdom around, and it doesn't have to be, people's faith is very personal, but how can people live authentically in the workplace and talk about their faith or be faithful as they work?
Well, I learned it the hard way. I'll tell you that. Early in my career, I bought into the idea that you can't bring faith into the workplace. And I had lots of people tell me that if you want to be successful, you got to leave faith behind. And so in the 90s, early in my career, I had the mindset, well, I'll just check my faith at the door when I go to work, which in my case is walking through a door literally in my house, because the office that we ran these businesses from was attached to the end of my house. I've got 12,500 square feet of an office in the middle of a cornfield. So not a great plan there, but the reality is that I checked my faith at the door for a number of years. And the problem was that when I went back home, I didn't always pick it back up. And separation started to happen. And it got me in trouble financially and with relationships and things. And I went, God had to whack me upside the head and help me realize that, you can't live two lives. You just can't effectively be two different people. At least I can't. And so, I really made the decision that, I'm going to live authentically, transparently, and openly with everybody. And, not everyone's going to like my faith and the choices I make, but I'm not going to hide it and pretend that it isn't real for me. And so, in the early 2000s, I made that shift. And, for the most part, I would say people appreciate and respect that. They don't always agree with me, but
Sure.
they know where I stand. And, we started to incorporate faith-based things into what we did at work, not walking around with the Bible, hitting people over the head with it and saying, you got to think the way I think and believe what I believe. But, again, just, living transparently, my perspective on how we live in the world, we're Jesus, we're the skin of Jesus for people to see. And we need to be transparent and let people know our hearts. And, most people appreciate it. You referenced that we did prayer meetings, we've done worship services at our events, and there's nothing more exciting than getting a couple hundred IT people together and listening to them sing. It's amazing what God can do if we're just willing to be open and let Him use us to make a difference in other people's lives. And so, every morning when we have our peer group meetings, we'll have 25 or 30 people gather, for a half an hour to pray and share what they're learning from Scripture. It's just a part of who we've become as an organization, and it makes a huge impact in people's lives to know they're not alone. They're part of a community of faith, and it's been exciting to watch. We've seen some really powerful things happen because we make that a priority in what we do.
I think that is such encouragement for me and maybe for some of my listeners. There was, I said that this is the first time I'm talking about my faith on a podcast, but maybe I made a small remark once in a podcast that was just, referencing something minor. And one of my clients, a CEO, said to me after, I listened to your podcast. He was like, it was really good to hear you talk briefly about your faith. And I didn't even realize I had, although that stray comment, he picked up on it, right? So it was subtle.
Yeah, yeah.
And I actually don't know really what his faith is, but what I do know is that he is very strong inside his organization and making sure that everybody brings their authentic self to work. And he's very much pushing those types of, that culture in his organization. So then he said, it was great to see you make that comment because, faith is a very important way that you bring yourself authentically to work. And a lot of people are afraid to do that, right? So he made that comment. And then rather than exploring that, I was like, thank you very much. Let's move on and talk about you, But again, another encouragement. So when you say most people will be, appreciate that you're showing yourself and not to let sort of the fear of, what others who might not share your faith might say, use that as an encouragement.
Well, and certainly we've had people of other faiths say, well, where's our time? And
Mm.
my answer is always, let's make your time. I want everybody to express their faith and to live it out transparently. And so, I don't know if you know this, but I carried an orange badge for Microsoft for 5 years as
No.
a contractor.
Okay.
And back in the 2003 to 2008 timeframe. And I swore when I came to campus for the first time out in Redmond back in 2003, I didn't think there were any believers on that campus at all. I mean, I had no idea whether I was the only Christian walking around there or what. But over the course of that journey, there's lots of Christians there. They were just afraid to really let that be worn on their shirt sleeve. And so I started to get together with folks and have breakfast with them or whatever, and found a number of believers that we could spend time together, and it was encouraging. And so I think people really appreciate faith. I think there's too much fear that's been thrown around out there, and again, it's not a license to go around and beat people up with the Bible, but people want to know our hearts. They want to know who we are, what makes us tick. And faith is if you've got faith, it's a big part of what makes you tick. And so it's important that I think we live it transparently.
I think it's a big part of what makes you tick, and it's a big part of what informs your leadership style and your beliefs that impact everybody around you as a leader. So, all right, well, thank you for that. Thank you so much. You give me a lot to think about. I want to go back to your peer groups, right? So you, as I understand it, the peer groups that you created became a fairly large business that you then sold to ConnectWise. I think that was Heartland Tech. And you
Yep.
sold that to ConnectWise, and now you are the VP of Ecosystem Evangelism at ConnectWise, still involved in that business, right? Please tell me about these peer groups, why you created them, and what they're all about.
Yeah. So I was a part of a peer group in the late 90s. We were focused exclusively on financials and financial execution. And, that rubbed me the wrong way because sure, business success is important and we all want to have that. But, we would have situations where somebody in the room was struggling with a marriage or with something with their family. And, the facilitator would basically say, we're not going to talk about that. We're here to deal with your business.
Hmm.
And so, I decided that, I wanted to create something that was more holistic. And so in the early 2000s, what really pushed me along was this thing called Y2K. And some of your listeners may be too young to even know that it happened. But I drank the Kool-Aid in 1999 that Y2K was going to be the greatest event for IT that ever happened in history. The world was going to come to a screeching halt, and we had all this new stuff we needed to implement for people. And January 1st came, and it didn't come to Iowa at all.
No, it didn't
There
come to
there
where I
was
was
no
either. I think I was
there
in
was
DC.
no Y2K. Um, and so I had hired a dozen engineers in the second half of 99 to be ready. And by April of 2000, we were bleeding cash drastically. And so I said, we got to talk to some other people and figure out what we're doing wrong here. And so one of my management team members said, "Hey, let's just call a couple other folks that are trying to do this and see if they'll sit down with us and talk about it." And so we called three other companies across the state of Iowa and said, let's meet in Des Moines, let's compare notes, let's figure out what's what. And they agreed, and we got together. And while we did talk about Y2K for a little bit because there was nothing to talk about, we talked about a lot of other things. We learned a lot from each other, and it was like, this is a pretty good deal. Let's try this again. And so they agreed, and so the peer groups were really started for our own benefit. We're trying to keep my company afloat. Um, over the next 5 years, we grew from the four of us to 12 companies, and that was all I ever intended to do, was to grow a peer group of 12. 12, was a magic number from Scripture. I thought that's the right number. So, but people would hear about it, and they would come up to me at events and say, "Hey, I want that peer group thing you got." And I'd say, "Nope, we got 12 members. That's all there's going to be." So after a number of people pushed on me, I said, "Okay, I'll create a wait list. Okay, and if somebody drops out, I'll at least know I can call you, and you're willing to step up." Um, at the end of 2005, I had 30 companies on a wait list, and it was like, well,
There's a
the
need
light
here.
bulbs kind of went off finally. And so we started a couple more groups in 2006. And again, I would go to events, and one of them was out in Redmond, SMB Nation. And, in 2006, I shared a presentation at that event and came off the stage, and I had 60 companies come up to me and
60.
say, we want to be in your peer groups. And I thought, whoa, now we got to get serious about this. It's no longer just something I do on the side. So we formed an organization and started to build them. And, by 2018, when we transitioned to ConnectWise, we had over 50 peer groups that we were facilitating. Today, we've got over 90
Wow.
since the ConnectWise acquisition. And we've got them in Europe, we've got them in APAC, so they're global, and they're impactful. And we talk about four things. We talk about legacy; that's the foundation, and we ask people to write a legacy plan for their business, but also for their life. We talk about three annual plans: the life plan, the leadership plan, and the business plan. And every quarter, we focus on one of those four plans, and people write those and share them within their group, and then they're held accountable to execute on those things and really drive their life and their business. And it's been exciting to watch. Everybody wants to make money, and we focus on that. We benchmark. Exciting growth for us. We just in our last 4 quarters of benchmarking our members, they generated $4.1 billion in revenue over the last 12 months. So it's impacting them financially. But the things that excite me the most are, marriages that are restored, issues with kids and families that have been worked through, partnership issues. We got a lot of companies, small businesses that are 50-50 partners. Sounds great when you start them, but at some point there's always some challenges. So we work through those kind of things, and the things that were warned about when we started them, Jamie, it's going to get messy. It's going to be muddy. It is.
So is life,
People's
right?
people's lives are messy and muddy.
Yes.
But that's where the real impact happens. And so it's been a lot of fun to really watch that. We've got over 50 facilitators now on our team that help us deliver those things. So it's very structured in what we try to do, but we always make time to get into the mud with folks if they need help.
So these are these peer groups. What struck me, so they're all CEO and founders, right? So of tech companies, is that right?
They're all C-level people.
C-level
So
people.
we've expanded beyond just the CEOs. So we have groups for sales execs, for service execs, CFOs, COOs, CPOs.
So what was not surprising when I was reading up and heard about the success of these peer groups, what was not surprising to me was the value and how excited people were to join. Because in my business, in the coaching business I do, CEOs, senior leaders, it's so lonely, right? It is just so lonely. And having that peer collaboration is so valuable, okay? What was surprising to me, as I heard maybe you speak on another podcast, was how much work goes into this. So anybody who is assuming they can just kind of show up and consume, forget about it, right? Like this is a lot of preparation, a lot of action, and the accountability piece. I'm going to put a piece of it. I'm going to put together an annual plan, and then my peers are going to hold me accountable to that, right? I mean, that's the piece that maybe was a little more surprising. I'm like, oh, this is an active sport here. This is not a passive leadership training that you get to check out and sort of relax for a couple of days.
No, Pete, when we get together, it's serious business. They benchmark financials every quarter, so they have to enter their financials into our benchmarking system, so they know how they perform compared to other members of their group, but also to the general population that we benchmark. But the accountability piece is what's missing for most of us as small business owners, especially. We don't have a board overlooking what we're doing. It's me, myself, and I. And the problem with it's a great way to live, right? Everybody wants to be their own boss, and that's fun. The problem with being your own boss is you do what you want to do, not what you need to do. And that's where the peer group really steps in and says, you were here last quarter, and every meeting you set 3 goals you're going to accomplish in the next 90 days. And you got to defend them when you come back. And so, it's not acceptable to come back and say, yeah, well, I told you I was going to do this, but I decided, that's too much work. I'm not doing it. We use the survivor model. So you get voted off the island if you don't perform. People don't want to sit in a room with folks that are not serious because they're paying a lot of money to participate, but they also give up 3 days of time. And so that's the most important part. So it's high stakes business, right? And people perform and execute, and it really propels them to success. And that's a big part of what we're trying to accomplish is tell us what you're trying to do, and then we're going to push you to get you there.
So I've said maybe a few times, not today, but a few times, that I think I should have been an engineer because I see something that I really like. And in this case, your reputation, the outcomes of the successful businesses that you created. And I want to reverse engineer it and be like, okay, so how did he do that? Like, what are the things? And here's what I'm picking up on. The through lines for you is you see a need, right? Whether it be in the agricultural space, maybe a less than ideal, situation that you're in, like a peer group. And you think, how can we create value? How can we create something that's really, really valuable? Back to that law of value. Focusing on the success of others enables you to really get that value proposition right. And this idea that we are just one person. There's not a Jamie work persona and a Jamie at home persona. We are one person. And the more that we can get those in alignment, then we can be successful as a person at work, at home, and all the different hats that we have. Do I have that right? This
Yeah.
is
I
what's
mean,
really coming out for me.
what I think about Jamie is impact, right?
Mm,
I want to do things that's going to impact people, for eternity first, but also impact them in terms of the outcome of their life. And you know, I think a lot of us think that, if we can just make enough money, everything will be great. Money does not deliver happiness. It certainly does not deliver significance. It's great to have it. You can do a lot more if you have some, but it's not the end game. And that's what I've found with business leaders is that too often they're focused on just let me get the P&L right and everything else will be fine. Well, I can tell you a lot of people get the P&L right and their lives are a disaster. And so you've got to have the balance and you've got to look at things holistically and be willing to deal with the hard things that are going to come up. And a lot of those are not in the business. And so, I'm focused on impact. I want to help people be successful, but I want them to have significance, and I want that to flow into their legacy. I've spent a lot of time with folks that have had successful exits, made more money than they ever dreamed they were going to make, and come out the other side and be completely miserable and lost and wandering in the forest, wondering what to do. Um, Business owners, their identity and their purpose gets so intertwined with their organization that when that's gone, and you wake up the next day and you don't have any email in your inbox and your calendar's completely free, they don't know what to do.
mm.
And that was another peer group that we founded to try to address that, called Success to Significance. And so we gather successful exits leaders, and we talk about what's my purpose now? Why do I get up in the morning? Everybody comes into that group saying, I'm going to play golf, I'm going to watch Netflix, and I'm going to travel. That is my solution. And about a month later, they come back and say, I am miserable. I don't have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I don't know what to do. So, all people, especially men, decide I'm going to micromanage the house. I've been gone for the last 30 years running the business, but I'm sure I can help my wife do better. And that is not the formula for success and making a happy home. So, people have to rediscover their purpose. And again, this is where faith, intersects in so many cases. That's where we can find purpose, and through the go-giver mindset. And so a lot of these successful business leaders, they're facilitating peer groups with us now. That's a way they can give back, share their expertise, and help other people through the journey they're on.
Along the lines of this, like we're one person, I experienced a little bit of this. I was in my early 40s, and everything was going great at Microsoft. I was getting promotions. I was happy. I loved my team. The work we were doing was challenging. Yet there was this discontent, and I didn't know where it was coming from. Just sort of this discontent. And of
Mhm.
course, I had 3 young kids, so things were challenging. So some days that were hard at work, I'm like, oh, maybe I should leave. But there's just some discontent. I'm like, what's that all about? And I was on vacation with my husband, and I read Halftime, the book Halftime. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
is that Bob Buford?
Bob Buford.
Bob
Yep.
Buford's Halftime. And it's all about this idea of success to significance. And it planted some seeds with me. And I think it helped me by the time I transitioned out of Microsoft onto what I believe is my success to significance journey. But still, and I'm going to share this because I just shared it with one of my clients, and it was a really, I think, a great moment for both of us. Still, so I'm on this journey. I'm understanding I'm going to make this decision. It was my decision to leave Microsoft. It was a beautiful exit on both parts. But when I left Microsoft, that first couple months, when people came up to me and they said, "Oh, what do you do?" I realized in that moment how much of my ego, I didn't even think I had an ego. My ego was tied to, oh, I'm a GM at Microsoft, right? So much of how I viewed myself, even though I was prepared for this, like I had read the book, I had done the thinking and the soul searching, right? And so what you're talking about really runs deep. And I think that can happen in major transitions, but even more minor transitions of, jobs or company changes or things like that. And so I think being anchored in something deeper around what is really my purpose? Why am I here? And some of the faith-based things will really help a lot of people get on their way.
And that's why legacy planning is so important. The thing that I always encourage people to think about, you're going to leave a legacy. It's not optional. It will happen. Everybody leaves a legacy. The question is, what legacy do you want to leave? And the misconception is that, legacy happens when you die. Well, the reality is legacy is created while you live. And you can't wait till you're on your deathbed and say, "Hey, I want to be remembered as this kind of a person that was making these kind of impacts. I haven't really done anything about it, but that's what I want you to think about me." That's not how it works. People are going to think and remember us based upon the way we live, which is why the go-giver mindset is such an important part of even that process.
Mm.
But one of the exercises we did at our last Success to Significance meeting was I asked everybody to write their own obituary.
Oh, wow.
And
It's like
to
a Stephen
really,
Covey. Well, not quite that, but just like, what do you want people to say on your
yeah,
deathbed?
begin with the end in mind,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And at first there was some groaning and moaning, but they all did it. And when you stop and think about what is it that I want the impact of my life to be, it helps to give you some focus. And quite honestly, most of us don't want to be remembered for, we made a lot of money or we had a lot of stuff. It's crazy to me that we buy a bunch of stuff and then we go rent storage spaces to put it all in or throw it in our basement because we don't really use it. We just got it. Um, that's not significance. And so there's so much opportunity for us to create legacy, and legacy can last for generations. That's the mindset that my wife and I are working with
Yes.
now is how do we create generational legacy? How do we do things today, make decisions today that are going to impact not just ourselves and our kids, but our grandkids. We've got 4 grandkids now, so we're doing a lot of things thinking how can we impact their lives, but beyond that, because they're going to have kids and we're going to have great grandkids at some point, and so generational legacy is to me a huge opportunity that we can all work toward, but it doesn't happen if we don't have a plan. It won't matter if we aren't using our time, effectively. We all get the same amount. We play on a level playing field. There's 168 hours every week. It's how we use them that's going to determine the impact that it makes. But if we're not intentional, I know what happens. It happens to me too. We piddle it away watching TV or doing stuff that doesn't matter. And then we complain about the fact we don't have any time. There's plenty of time. We just got to use it effectively. And that's how we're going to create the legacy we want to leave. And that's the thing that I really want to challenge people to think about is what is your legacy going to be? You make it by what you do today.
I I think this is so powerful, Arlen, and how you've been able to incorporate this into the work that you do into an organization like ConnectWise that's helping many, many different IT partners and into just the businesses that you run. This does not have to be this separate thing that we go to work and then we worry about all of these things. So what advice would you give to my listeners that are sitting here saying, yeah, like I want to do some work on this, but I don't even know where to get started. Are there, certainly if you're an IT, services leader, there may be ways to get involved in your program, but the rest of our listeners too, are there books or frameworks or things that they can do to start getting started?
Well, I would just encourage you to start small. I remember when we were starting to incorporate this into our businesses, one of the things that we did was for Christmas, we offered to take people to a marriage retreat,
Hmm.
and we rented a bus and we hauled people, to the marriage retreat, which was 50 miles away. We paid for their hotel room and fed them and all those things. It was a great experience for them and their spouse, but it was a great team building thing. We had time together and we created deeper relationships. So look for the little things that you can do to really, and we didn't force it, right? You opted
Sure.
in. If you didn't want to do that, we gave you, a equivalent gift card that you could spend. But that was kind of how I inched my way in, Jamie, was look for ways that we can do things that matter, that encourage people on their journey, because employees don't know that it's okay either. If we don't model it for them,
Hmm.
they don't know that it's okay to talk about faith at work and those kind of things. So modeling is a big part of it. Um, you know, but to me, it really comes down to one of the things that I started to do that's been really, really important to me and helpful, I think, to others. I write every day. Um, so I have a blog that I post 5 days a week now, and my daughter Lori writes it on Saturdays. So it goes out 6 days a week. I haven't missed a day since 2008. Okay, so for however many years that is, 17 years, I have written every day and shared that with whoever wants to be on the list. And a lot of my employees have opted to be on the list. I write about three things. I share something I learned yesterday. So as I go through the day, I'm looking for a lesson that I can share or something that I can use to encourage people. I study scripture every day, so I have a section where I write on the scripture that I'm studying that day, and and then I have a section where I share something that I learned from somebody else. So, I'll repost a blog
Hmm.
or an email or whatever that I think adds value to other people. And number one, that's changed my life. The discipline of writing daily has been a huge impact in my own personal journey. Um, and I'm free to tell people I write this for myself. Okay. The beauty of technology is I can share it with as many people as want it without having to do a whole lot of other stuff. But I would do it if nobody else got it. Today it goes out to about 850 people every morning. And I tell them, I don't expect you to read it all. If you read it all, there's something wrong with you because it's a lot. It's overwhelming. But what people constantly tell me is, well, for some reason I read it today, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. And that's God at work by just making things available. That has been a huge part of helping my teams understand who I am, what matters, and to give them the green light to basically, do the same thing and to share with others transparently and openly. So, I don't think there's a formula for how you can implement this, but I think, if you really want to do it and you pray about it, God will begin to show you ways, and you can gradually over time just make it okay. That's really what people are looking for, to make it okay that they can live transparently and not feel like they have to guard everything that they say and do.
Thank you so much, Arlen. That is such a gift, what you shared. Um, I can't believe it's been almost an hour. That flew by for me. By the way, your daughter, Laurie, is a special person. You just brought her up. So I just want to say, hey, Laurie, I know you're listening. You're the best. She is an incredible business leader and talent creator and developer, leadership coach. And she's just an awesome person. So I just wanted to share that. Love
Takes
her.
after her mom. She takes after her mom. I don't take any credit.
I hope my husband says that about me too when my boys get compliments, oh, they take after their mom. I'm just going to assume that happens. I have all boys. All right. Well, in closing, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. All of the success, the way that you've seen needs and stepped into the gap to fill them, creating value for people professionally and personally. If I ask all my guests one last final question, which is if you could wrap by giving just one piece of advice about leadership, what would that be?
Well, realize that leadership is not about you, right? I'm a believer in the upside down triangle version of leadership. The leader is not at the top, he's at the bottom, and he's holding up the rest of his team and providing, the resources, the opportunities, the authority, all those things that are necessary for companies to function well. It doesn't happen top down, it happens bottom up. And my job as the leader is to support everybody else that's really making it happen on the ground, and not look in the mirror and say, wow, look at how great I am, because I'm not. But I can enable people to be good leaders with some direction, and then the support they need to be successful in what they're doing. Too often we set people up to fail, not
Mm.
succeed. And we've got to really, servant leadership is my experience of how things can work well. And it's not by them serving me, it's by me serving them.
What a beautiful visual. I just drew that on my paper. I'm like, I like that. You're kind of holding it up and supporting. So
Yeah,
fantastic. Well, Arlin, thank you so much. If you're willing to share it, I'd love to put a link to your blog in the show notes. I'm going to join as well. I want to receive that wisdom every morning as well. So thank you for that. Wonderful meeting you today. And I just want to thank you for all you're doing and the impact that you're having. And thanks for the impact you had on me and our listeners today.
absolutely. Well, it was a joy to be with you.
Likewise. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Join us every Tuesday for insider access to executive leadership.